What's up, guys? Sam Logue here.
And Joe O'Neill looking very like Sam Logue in Irish boxing gear.
We're twinning it here. Obviously, for irishboxing.com, we want to bring you guys a bit of a preview show for Katie Taylor versus Karen Elizabeth Carabajal here in the OVO Wembley Arena in London. It's weigh-in day. We're only back from the weigh-ins. We've been doing some work, doing some editing, getting some videos out for you guys, and we decided it would be a great idea to do a little preview show and give you guys some of our opinions. So, Joe, let's get straight into it, man. What did you make of Katie Taylor at the weigh-in? She looked in incredible shape.
Yeah, like oddly incredible shape for for all intents and purposes. We're saying Carabajal is probably the weakest opponent Taylor's fought in a good long time.
Yeah.
Right after the back of the Serrano fight, like not the longest turnaround time at all, and she comes in looking stronger and more muscular at least than she ever has.
Very much so. Very much so. What do you expect that to have in terms of, or what implications does that have on her, or will that have on her performance? Do you expect her to look a little different, or do you expect her to be hitting harder? What do you think that will have any effect?
Well, like, you always hear about, like, six-packs don't win fights and stuff, but then you were looking at that there, I was like, geez, maybe Katie will get a stoppage for the first time in a good long while. I think the last one was the Rose Volante fight, maybe a long time ago.
But year back that, isn't it?
Yeah, 3 or 4. But yeah, she does look strong. Carabajal looks like, and again, you don't want to read too much into weigh-ins, but like, she looked quite overawed. She was very meek, sort of, very deferential, and yeah, like, I think everyone sort of knows, and we've said this before, that it is basically the Katie Taylor show here. It's a celebration of Katie Taylor. It's barely even being advertised as a fight. Like, you need to go looking for her opponent's name, and I do think that's going to be reflected in the actual fight itself, and like the weigh-in only just solidified that for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. There is a real air of that around yesterday at the press conference and today at the weigh-in. That's very celebratory of Katie Taylor. Do you think that there's a bit of danger there, though, that we know Katie Taylor, we know what she's like, but is there that bit of danger that she might be overlooking it, or that because of the occasion itself that, you know, subconsciously she might be taking it a bit easy? Is there a danger?
I don't think there's a danger of her losing the fight. There might be a danger of her getting involved in a potentially scrappy fight and maybe not looking as well, or maybe underperforming, maybe overgoing for it and just looking scrappy, trying to load up maybe a little bit too much. But I don't think any version of Carabajal could really beat any version of Taylor. That, like, even if Taylor has the worst possible start, she has enough boxing in her that she'd be able to turn around anything. Like, and this is quite disrespectful, I suppose, but no disrespect is intended. It's just two boxers on two completely different levels.
Yeah, well, that's sometimes just the way it is, isn't it? And when you get these, and I think it does tend to happen a little bit more often in the female side of the sport, that you get mandatory challengers and stuff who, well, I suppose Katie as well is a massive part of this. She's just so good that you get a lot of mandatory challengers who work themselves up through the governing bodies and through the rankings, and fair play to them, but that they're just not there. They're not on the same level, and that just happens, I suppose, sometimes, which is fair enough. But, you know, I think from my perspective, and from an Irish boxing perspective, I think it's kind of important, or it's very nice for us to have these moments of Katie Taylor where we can celebrate her, because she's such a hero. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, and to be honest, Taylor, the activity she has had, which is 3 fights a year every year for the last however many, like, it's more active than pretty much any top level fighter, either gender, and it does keep her sort of in the forefront of our minds, that back when she was in the amateurs, you might be getting one major tournament every year, and then for the more general sports fan, it's the Olympics every 4 years. So she is sort of front and centre, and we're like, really has taken on that mantle of the main fighter in Irish boxing, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. We get to see her, as you said, and celebrate her, which is great for her, and she deserves it. Let's assume she wins this fight, which I think we both agree she will, and we even said off camera we think that there could be a stoppage in this. Let's hope that there is. I think she's probably a little bit overdue. I mean, some people might not agree with this, but I think in a way she's maybe overdue a stoppage or some kind of different kind of performance. It would be nice to see that, because obviously she goes on points a lot. Sometimes she gets dragged into a fight that she doesn't need to get dragged into. But what do you think is next, or what would you like to see next for Katie Taylor, pending a win?
Well, the Croke Park talk is so everywhere this week, and it really has flared up, and it's good to just get the discussion going. I'm not sure how much of them are just like Eddie Hearn plumazing Irish journalists asking questions. But even if Croke Park is on the agenda, it probably won't be next, because such is the frequency that Katie Taylor fights with. She is going to be getting extremely itchy to fight next February, next March, which probably isn't ideal Croke Park time. So, like, maybe there's a St. Patrick's Day fight out in Boston, I think, is what's actually going to be next. And then, if there is going to be a Croke Park fight, it will be in the summer. So,
Yeah.
like, and again, like, it's going to happen that the Croke Park talk will, I imagine, take over the post-fight press conference, but I think we do have a couple more steps to go just before then.
Yeah. Is there any names that you would like to see her in with? Like, what kind of trajectory do you want her to take now? I know you've said this yourself. Maybe we're towards the back end with Katie Taylor, and there might need to be some caution or care taken, you know, depending on what way it goes, depending on how she looks kind of from fight to fight. But who would you like to see her in there with? I mean, there's a few banging names.
Yeah, there's big fights. There's obviously the Serrano rematch. There is Alicia Baumgartner, her stablemate, her managerial and promotional stablemate, who just had that big win over Michaela Meyer. There's also the likes of the winner of the Chantel Cameron and Jessica McCaskill fight. I imagine that's going to go to a rematch though afterwards.
Yeah.
There's the Korean super featherweight champion Hyun-Mi Choi. There's even Heather Hardy still going around, and that would be a Boston sort of fight, I imagine, if it's a sort of under radar.
Another showcase though.
Yeah, it is. But I think, I was saying this in the podcast earlier in the week, that Estelle Mosley, the IBO champion who has a couple of wins over Taylor in the amateurs, might be a interesting fight. That would get the boxing fans along with the sports fans sort of interested.
Yeah, it's marketable, isn't it? Like,
yeah, like it, and that is a legitimate contest as well. That like maybe it's too dangerous, but that is a fight that's sort of on our list. Ochigava, her old her old Rio, no, going back again, her old London rival,
London final, right?
Yeah, she's still trucking along in the pros. Maybe that's more just for the Irish rather than, but that could be a big fight as well.
Yeah.
Like there are still names out there with Carabajal here. It's sort of, she was the one that was available because tight turnaround, tight negotiating period, maybe not as much money in the pot to go around, that like Carabajal sort of ticked the box, and just to keep Taylor active.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll have a bit more time for the next one, and it might be someone a little bit of a level up. And also, if you're going to be doing a huge fight in Croke Park, there needs to be somewhere in the middle to sort of build yourself up to it. So you have Carabajal here tomorrow night, and then maybe someone another level up, and then you're going a level up again to Serrano rematch or whoever they're going to get into Croke Park.
Yeah, definitely. But it's just about getting that hook, isn't it? Like, if there's some sort of narrative that you can pull, she's with no better man than Eddie Hearn to kind of to push whatever narrative is available. So any of those would work, especially that Estelle Mosley one, actually one that I didn't think of, which could be very pushable, but obviously a dangerous fight, because it's not the one you're going to use for Croke Park probably, because it's probably not a big enough name, but it's a dangerous fight in its own right. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. It's fun to be here and kind of see Katie Taylor and see kind of how the fight week works around her and stuff. It's slightly different feel. There is definitely that air of like, oh, this is a proper superstar we're dealing with here, like, you know what I mean? But let's move on slightly, because I want to talk about Gary Cully, because he is kind of going from strength to strength, isn't he? And he's after getting signed by Matchroom directly. He's straight out against an undefeated Frenchman. What do you make of this matchup against BELMEHDI? I think they're pushing the narrative that it's that it has the potential to be a competitive fight, but I'm personally not so sure. What do you think?
Yeah, no, you're right that they're doing the French champion versus the Irish champion, and
undefeated fighter against undefeated fighter.
I suppose like we only had a couple of weeks ago we were talking about Eric Donovan versus a French champion there, and yeah, I think like you're probably dealing with someone who's the next level up in Gary Cully, and maybe the French opponent who probably isn't as high level. It's a perfectly decent and serviceable fight on paper. It's not as exciting as maybe the Vasquez fight was, but then I suppose that's the added layer of security that Cully now has, having signed up with Matchroom, that he's getting a more prominent fight against a easier opponent, it looks. I suppose BELMEHDI's probably not going to be looking at this preview, but like talking to some of Cully's team, they're thinking that like he's not used to fighting someone as tall as Gary Cully. Like Gary Cully's what, 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah.
He's fighting an opponent who is a very large lightweight and is now facing into Gary Cully, who's even larger, and they're expecting maybe some openings to come via that BELMEHDI just isn't going to know what's sort of in front of him here.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely grand fight, and the encouraging talk as well is that they're saying, okay, like Gary will hopefully get this out of the way, and then they're thinking like January, February next year, like they're looking to really get moving and hopefully be knocking on the door world level like in the summer, and that would line up brilliantly with Croke Park as well.
Do you have any names in mind that you'd like to see Gary in with? Like, I know for myself, from seeing him live in March, on the Condon Wood undercard, and just knowing him a little bit and seeing what he's able to do and having kind of paid attention to his career, he does seem to be one of the more special Irish fighters of the last while, especially because of he's a bit of a physical anomaly as well for the weight. Who would you like to see him in there with? Like, I'd really like to see him tested now, and I think from talking to Gary, from knowing him a little bit now over the last while, I think he's going to be able to deal with a step up, like a real step up. I think he'll deal with it really, really well. Who would you like to see him in with?
Well, there seems to be a lot of talk about the Maxi Hughes fight. We were just talking about it today, that Gary Cully and Maxi Hughes were originally signed to fight before the COVID lockdown started. Hughes had already pulled out of the fight at that stage anyway, but that's an IBO world title. Again, like as you're saying, you're completely correct. I think Gary Cully is probably our top prospect at that age, approaching sort of world level. Yeah, Maxi Hughes seems a makeable and good fight. I think that could happen soon as well. Like, I don't think they would have any fear there. There's also the guy Angel Fierro, who was initially proposed as an opponent, but then he had a fight in Mexico instead on a matchroom card, big knockout. So they're sort of maybe two matchroom fighters you could sort of funnel in together. Like, if we're talking about the path, maybe it is Fierro early next year, and then you could have Hughes on a big summer card. And yeah, it's not one of the four major world titles, but it is a big belt and a big fight, and I think they're again two extremely winnable fights. And even then, like, the lightweight division is sort of again in flux as well. You're not really sure who's sticking around. Devin Haney looked really, really tight at the weight in his most recent fight there against Cambosis, so he could be moving up. Teofimo Lopez has already gone up. Davis and Ryan Garcia are talking about a catchweight fight, so 135 is clearing out now as well. I know Shakur Stevenson is coming up, but like him and Cully, I'm not putting them together as a fight immediately, but like him and Cully could be the two big names in that division quite soon if they're both, if Cully at least is pushed on as much as Matchroom wanted. Do
you see Cully being a world champion and a dominant force in the division over the next couple of years?
I do think he can be a world champion, yeah. Like, as you're saying, the physical dimensions, and it's not even like it's sometimes easy just to talk about like the physical aspect,
how big he is and stuff,
but like there's a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily due to his physicality and isn't necessarily unique to him, but you still have to do it, and he is the sort of committed fighter who is training every day, who is willing to take steps up and willing to say yes to any opponent that's put in front of him, and just has that mentality that in truth many boxers don't.
Well, I mean it is interesting for sure. He is one of those, he will take anybody, and he believes he's good enough to win against anybody. He only said to me yesterday, I asked him, how long until he feels like he can be on that level, as with the likes of a Devin Haney or Lomachenko, who are, I suppose, was maybe the name that we didn't mention there in the lightweight division, in my opinion probably the two best ones. And he said he's on that level. You see, he believes he's already there. It's just about maybe experience, maybe getting some more rounds and stepping up the levels. But yeah, it's definitely it's an interesting one to see how it all plays out. Eddie mentioned to me today about possibly a Cambosis fight. What would you make of that one? I mean, that screams war and like just cracker to me.
Yeah, actually, that's the first time I've ever even considered the two of them together. And Yeah, we probably do need to preface there that like we think Cully can. I don't necessarily I wouldn't be saying fight Devin Haney tomorrow.
Yeah.
But Kambosos, maybe after like if you're doing a Fierro and or Hughes, Kambosos probably is the next sort of step, late end of next year. Like we saw Kambosos against Lee Selby, which is like if we're gonna say that the Kambosos versus Lopez fight was sort of his one night as a very, very like his just fairy tale night, and maybe that might give people a slightly inflated opinion of him. Like he went out and did do that and is a legitimate was a legitimate world champion, but Devin Haney won quite comfortably in the last 2 fights, and like it does make sense as a fight down the road.
I think it could be an absolute barn burner of a fight. I think Kambosos, I think it's an interesting one with someone like George Kambosos, because he did have that unbelievable night against Teofimo Lopez, but I personally always thought he was a little bit underrated. I remember seeing him against Lee Selby thinking, this kid is actually really, really good. Like, obviously he was a little bit shown up in terms of boxing skill, maybe the distance, judgment of distance and things like that against Devin Haney.
No shame there.
But no shame, because Devin Haney, in my opinion, is one of very, very few. He's a kind of a pound for pound name at this stage. He's that kind of ilk. But there's no shame in being just a little bit below that and having other skills. But sometimes you meet guys who are just able to completely nullify what you're good at, and I think that was the problem for Kambosos. He's come across a technical mover who with a great jab, who's able to just walk him onto shots and just completely nullify everything he's good at. But against Cully, it could be a different kind of. Cully could perhaps do the same to him and walk him onto something very big, because you'd have to say Cully is, at this stage, we would think probably a pound for pound bigger puncher than Devin Haney, but hard to know because we need to see him against better opposition.
Yeah, exactly, and we do need to see him. Like, he did have a moment of bother with Craig Woodruff as well a couple of years ago, and maybe he does need those sort of tough rounds. That I suppose against Miguel Vasquez it was more a sort of mental challenge to pick that punch and unlock that sort of lock.
Yeah,
maybe he does need an iron chin sort of guy that's gonna bring him into later rounds and maybe ragdoll him around a little bit, just to give that bit of. But I suppose he will say he's getting that in the gym. But it is really a sort of just all about matchmaking now, and
it's different under the lights as well, isn't it? You can do it in the gym if you want, but it's completely different. If we learned anything from watching boxing for years and years, it's completely different under the lights.
But it's a very exciting time for Gary. Like, just turning 27 next year, like he's at the sort of perfect spot now, and he's just ready to kick on. Like, he is the sort of guy you're excited about looking forward into the next couple of years, because so many of our fighters are the other side of 30, like, and we were talking about Pierce O'Leary earlier, and like in terms of like young talents coming up, like Gary Cully's probably the closest you're going to get to someone who is like knocking on the door of a world title in the next 12 months, who is that sort of younger side, who could have a very long future in world title fights. Definitely
ranked, I think, top 15 within 2 governing bodies at the moment as well. Definitely with the WBO anyway. Something that came into my head, which I'm interested in your opinion, is the IBO title. We kind of briefly touched on it there, but what is your general opinion of that? We're seeing a lot more. We now have 3 IBO champions in. Of course, Anto Kakachi was the first one to capture that title, followed by Dennis Hogan with for me, I think a really good win against Sam Eglinton. Maybe I'm just a bit of a Sam Eglinton fanboy, but I think a really solid win there. And then obviously Paddy McCrory doing an absolute number on Leon Bunn last weekend, was it, or the weekend before, over in Germany. So we have 3 very good fighters with those titles now. But what's your opinion of that title? It's definitely growing in legitimacy. It was a kind of a term I've used, or a phrase I've used a few times now. But is it a route that you want to see Irish fighters going down? Do you think that they can kind of get pigeonholed a little bit with it? Is it kind of like if you win an IBO title, you're still outside, or do you think it's a good segue title to get?
Well, it depends on what approach you take with it. Like, I personally love the IBO title in the sense that it gets fighters who are sort of, if it's not being used like Joshua does in a unification or whatever, that they tack it on. But if it's just an IBO title fight, it's usually boxers ranked between like 10 and 25 in the world, like outside of governing bodies. So it's a good high level fight for an Irish fighter. And as long as they're not Chris Eubank Jr. putting the belt on and going to nightclubs and declaring like I'm a world champion, it's just a high level fight. Like, I'd prefer to see them fighting for IBO belts than fighting in a WBO European belt where they bring a guy over on short enough notice. Like, the best thing you can say about all the IBO title fights so far, they've been very, very evenly matched, and wins worth celebrating. And I don't think anyone is making the claim that, okay, we now have one of the 3 light heavyweight world champions in McCrory, that the champions at light heavyweight are McCrory, Beterbiev and Bivol. Like, no one is saying that, even McCrory himself. So he has just got a very good win that you can't celebrate against another fighter who was coming to win, which so often isn't usually the case in these. Like, a lot of these belt fights, like, the deck is stacked against the opponent coming in, whereas these are like legitimate even fights, and Ireland are 3 for 3 in the last month, so I'm happy with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're dead right. It's kind of, it depends on how it's being approached, and like, for the fighters or for their management, what the IBO title actually means, and if it's a kind of a stepping stone, which is something that Irish fighters sometimes don't get, because the British title over here is such a big title, and it's such a kind of a important milestone title in terms of pushing towards bigger things. We don't really get that because obviously in Ireland we have less fighters, and the Irish title, often they're not so active and stuff like that, so there's different kind of reasons for it, but we kind of have to fight at a lower level and then maybe push towards the European title, which might be a jump too far sometimes or whatever, but you kind of get what I mean. But the IBO title is that nice kind of stepping stone title for our guys who are perhaps good enough to get to the upper echelons of the sport, which is really, really nice. Yeah, let's very, very quickly touch on the fight that wasn't, unfortunately, which is Kevin Ajarko was supposed to be on this bill, but he got injured and he had to pull out last week. I think he pulled out. Do you think that that's a massive blow to the card? Obviously, he's someone that Matchroom is pushing quite hard at the moment. A man from Belfast, so an Irishman who obviously we are eager to support, and unfortunately he's off the card. Yeah,
is it a blow to the card? I think it's more of a blow to Yarko himself. Like, that is a bit of a knock to his momentum, and now, as the way it normally goes, like, he's now sort of out of action now for the rest of the year, and then he's restarting next year. He's maybe coming back next March, so it's like it'll have been a long time since his last fight, and that maybe you're kicking the can on the Belfast show a little bit further down the road. Like, I think if he was to have a big win tomorrow night, and maybe then you're talking Belfast, but like, I don't think he's going to be able to come back in a Belfast fight now or whatever, so it's another fight. So it is just, and it's not the end of the world at all. He's still a young man, but it is like a 6-month delay on where he's at. It's a shame. I was looking forward to seeing him, and it was a good step up. I think at least Peter Dobson, higher ranked on the likes of Boxrec and stuff, and unbeaten, but you weren't 100% sure at the level he was sort of fighting. He's been in competitive fights on sort of lower level American cards, but you got the feeling he was announced early. He's an American guy coming to maybe put the cat amongst the pigeons, maybe get himself a matchroom contract. Like, so he was going to
real test.
Yeah, he was going to be coming to take Yarko's head off. You'd like to think. To be honest, I hope they get that sort of fight again, even if it's the same guy. Like, I was like to look at that. That was a good step up, rather than maybe a Mexican was maybe looking to be a bit more survivalist in it. Like, I think Dobson was coming to hopefully like change his career sort of. So hopefully we can get him again, and hopefully Yarko, the hand injury isn't too bad, and we can see him out, because again, he's a new training camp as well, and like, he'll be itching to get out under his new trainer.
What do you make of that switch from he was with the iBox gym in Alan Smith and Eddie Lamb, and he moved obviously up to John McNally in Liverpool, who kind of since then, well, he had already had Liam Smith, who was a bona fide world level and former world champion fighter, and then also got Josh Taylor in just after Kevin Ajarko, and has a few really, really high level fighters there. What do you think of that switch for him?
To be honest, I don't know. Like, it's obviously a personal thing. Like, even I suppose, like, you're going from one very good environment, and London obviously is a great place for sparring and stuff like that, to another very, like, a lot of Irish in Liverpool as well, good people to be around the gym. Like, just as long as he's still working towards those big fights, I don't particularly mind. Like, I don't have a particular affinity towards either gym. There's not really Irish trainers in there, so I'm just like, as long as Keevan's happy and he's working towards big fights, all for it. Hopefully
he's able to get some good sparring in there. I mean, obviously Liam Smith is the same weight as him, still a world class fighter in my opinion. And you've got JJ Metcalf in there as well, who I think is an extremely good fighter around that kind of British European level as well.
Yeah.
So if Kevin is able to get in there and get kind of rounds with them guys and learn from and with those kind of guys, you'd be thinking that he's definitely going to progress pretty quickly. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for us, Joe, isn't it, on the card. To everyone who's watching, make sure you tune in to irishboxing.com. Today and all day tomorrow, we're going to be producing loads of content on YouTube and on all of our social media platforms, irishboxing.com, on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook, irishboxing.com. So stay tuned for all of the fight content for Katie Taylor versus Karen Carabajal. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.